Atlanta's sticky twilight hums as Officer Derek Malone rips Lena Washington from her glossy SUV. His meaty hands cuffing her wrists, his voice spitting venom over her protests. He's sure she's a crook. She's just another black face. To him. 5 minutes later, a courtroom freezes. She's the chief federal prosecutor. Malone's smirk lingers unshaken as murmurs spread. She's uncuffed, but his glare promises war. A simple stop ignites a nightmare that'll shatter her life, her kin, her legacy. What hell awaits her next? Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe to catch every twist in Lena's fight ahead. Lena Washington gripped the leather steering wheel of her midnight blue SUV, the engine purring softly as she navigated the upscale streets of Atlanta's Buckhead district, the air thick with the scent of magnolias and exhaust. It was 6:30 in the evening, the sun dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, and she was bone-tired after a 12-hour day at the federal courthouse downtown, where she'd spent the morning dismantling a drug cartel's money laundering scheme and the afternoon briefing her team on a sting operation set for next week. At 42, Lena carried herself with a quiet fierceness. Her dark eyes sharp behind sleek glasses, her coiled hair pulled into a tight bun that spoke of discipline honed over 2 decades of clawing her way up from a public defender's desk to chief federal prosecutor for the Northern District of Georgia. She wore a tailored blazer, charcoal gray over a crisp white blouse, her badge of authority tucked in her purse beside a stack of case files, their edges worn from late-night reviews. The radio hummed low, an old jazz tune she barely registered, her mind replaying the cartel leader's smug face as she'd shredded his lies in court. She was 3 miles from home, a modest brick house in a quiet suburb where her son Jamal waited, probably sprawled on the couch with his algebra homework half done, when a sudden blare cut through her thoughts. A police siren, shrill and insistent, slicing the humid dusk like a blade. Her brow creased as she flicked her gaze to the rearview mirror, spotting the flashing red and blue lights of a cruiser tailing her, its grille looming too close for comfort. Confusion prickled her skin. She hadn't sped, hadn't swerved, hadn't even switched lanes in the last 10 minutes, her speedometer steady at 30 miles an hour, well under the limit on this tree-lined stretch of Peachtree Road. She signaled, right, easing the SUV onto the shoulder, gravel crunching beneath the tires as she killed the engine, her hands resting at 10 and 2, a habit drilled into her since her first driving lesson at 16, when her father had warned her about cops who saw her skin before her rights. The cruiser's door swung open, and out stepped Officer Derek Malone, a hulking figure in a starched blue uniform, his boots thudding against the pavement with a rhythm that oozed entitlement, his buzzed blonde hair catching the fading light, his pale eyes narrowing as he approached her window. Lena lowered the glass with a soft whir, keeping her movements slow, deliberate, her palms visible, knowing too well from years of prosecuting crooked cops how a twitch could turn a stop into a coffin. Malone leaned in, close enough for her, to smell the stale coffee on his breath, his badge glinting under the street lamp, his name etched in sharp letters she'd later sear into her memory. "License and registration," he barked, his voice rough as gravel. No pleas, no preamble, just a command laced with impatience that made her stomach tighten. "Good evening, officer," she said, her tone smooth as silk, despite the unease flickering in her chest. "May I ask what this is about?" She reached for her purse with measured calm, sliding out her license and the registration slip, her fingers brushing the embossed seal of her prosecutor's ID she didn't yet reveal, holding it back like an ace up her sleeve. Malone snatched, the papers ignoring her question, his thick fingers smudging the edges as he squinted at her name, then flicked his gaze to her face, his lips curling into something between a sneer and a scowl. "Do you know how fast you were going?" he asked, his words dripping with condescension as if she were a child caught sneaking candy, not a woman who'd spent her day upholding the law he swore to serve. Lena blinked, caught off guard, her mind racing to replay the last mile. "I was well within the speed limit," she replied, her voice steady. "Is there something else I should know?" Her calm seemed to ignite something in him, his jaw tightening as he stepped back, his eyes darting to the passenger seat where her case files sat in a neat pile, their titles obscured but their bulk unmistakable. "You're awfully defensive for someone pulled over," he said, his tone sharpening, suspicion glinting in his stare like he'd caught her red-handed in a lie she hadn't told. Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine, not from fear, but from recognition. She'd seen this script play out in 100 depositions, victims recounting stops that spiraled into nightmares because of men like him, badges twisted into weapons by prejudice. "I'm just trying to understand why I'm here," she said, keeping her composure ironclad, her hands still on the wheel, though her pulse ticked faster now, a drumbeat she refused to let him hear. Malone scoffed, a harsh sound that scraped the air. "Step out of the car," he ordered, his voice booming loud enough to turn heads from the sidewalk where a few pedestrians lingered, their silhouettes frozen in the gloaming. Lena's breath hitched, her mind flashing to the countless cases she'd tried, black men and women hauled from vehicles for nothing more than existing, their stories ending in blood or bars, and now here she was, the irony bitter as bile in her throat. She unbuckled her seatbelt, the click loud in the tense silence, and pushed the door open, stepping onto the asphalt with a grace that belied the storm brewing inside her, her heels clicking softly as she stood, 5'7" against his 6'2" bulk, his shadow swallowing hers in the dim light. "Hands where I can see them," he snapped, his volume spiking, drawing more eyes, a couple across the street whispering now, their phones half raised but not recording. "Not yet." "Officer," she began, her voice level as a tightrope. "I've cooperated. Fully. Can you tell me why I'm out here?" Malone smirked, a glint of triumph flashing in his eyes. "You're obstructing justice," he said, his words a slap, "and now you're resisting a lawful stop." Lena's jaw clenched. The accusations absurd, baseless, a playbook she'd dissected in courtrooms a dozen times. But knowing the law didn't shield her from his power in this moment, not on this quiet stretch of road where his word outweighed hers to anyone watching. "I'm not resisting," she said, her tone low but firm. "I've followed every instruction." "That's not what it looks like to me," he shot back, his hand darting to his belt, yanking the handcuffs free with a metallic clink that echoed in her ears like a gavel. Before she could speak again, he grabbed her arm, his grip bruising as he wrenched it behind her back, the cold steel biting into her wrists as he snapped the cuffs tight, her sharp inhale swallowed by the roar of her own restraint. "You people always lie," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear, low enough for his body cam to blur it into static, his words a venomous jab at her skin, her heritage, her very breath. Lena's eyes locked on his, calm but blazing, as he shoved her toward the cruiser, her blazer wrinkling under his rough hands, her dignity battered but unbroken. The onlookers gasped, a woman clutching her purse tighter, a man shaking his head, but no one stepped forward, their silence a weight she'd carry into the next battle. Malone's cam rolled, capturing his slurs, her compliance, the raw edge of his hate, a tape she'd later wield like a sword. But for now she was his prisoner, her SUV abandoned on the shoulder, its headlights dimming as he slammed her into the back seat, the door banging shut with a finality that promised more than a ticket, more than a fine, a war she'd never asked for, but would damn well fight. Her mind raced, calculating, as the cruiser lurched forward, Malone chuckling to himself in the front, oblivious to the storm he'd unleashed, the woman he'd underestimated now plotting every move to bury him, her resolve hardening with each jolt of the ride, her fury a quiet flame that would soon burn his world to ash. Derek Malone's cruiser screeched to a halt outside a squat brick courthouse on the edge of Atlanta's downtown, its faded sign flickering in the muggy night, the air buzzing with cicadas and the distant hum of traffic as Lena Washington sat rigid in the back seat, her wrists throbbing beneath the cuffs, her mind a steel trap snapping shut on every detail of the last 20 minutes. His slurs, his shove, the cold click of metal locking her fate. Malone yanked the door open, his thick fingers digging into her arm as he pulled her out, her heels scraping the pavement, her blazer now creased and smudged with grime from his rough handling, but her posture stayed unbroken, spine straight as a rod, eyes glinting with a fury she kept leashed for now. He marched her through the double doors, the hinges groaning under the weight of years, into a cramped hallway where fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on peeling beige walls, the faint smell of mildew clinging to the air. as clerks shuffled papers and lawyers muttered into phones. Their voices a low drone beneath the echo of her steps. Malone strutted ahead, his chest puffed out, boots clomping with a swagger that screamed he owned this place, owned her. His grip on her elbow tight enough to bruise as he paraded her past a scattering of onlookers, a janitor pausing mid-sweep, a young attorney glancing up from his briefcase with a flicker of pity she didn't want. What kind of man revels in dragging a woman through this gauntlet? Lena wondered, her gaze slicing through the haze, cataloguing every face, every whisper, fuel for the fire she'd soon unleash. They reached a courtroom at the hall's end, its oak doors scratched and worn, swinging open to reveal a sparse chamber where a handful of souls lingered. A bored clerk tapping at a keyboard, a court reporter adjusting her stenograph. 3 attorneys hunched over files, their ties loosened in the stifling heat. At the front, Judge Clara Evans perched behind the bench, a wiry woman in her late 50s, her skin a rich brown that glowed under the dim lights, her silver-flecked hair swept into a no-nonsense twist, her eyes like twin scalpels cutting through. The room's lethargy as Malone shoved Lena toward the defendant's table, her heels clicking a defiant rhythm against the scuffed linoleum. "Resisting arrest and obstruction of justice, Your Honor," he bellowed, his voice bouncing off the wood-paneled walls, loud and brassy, a performance for an audience that barely cared, his meaty hand gesturing at Lena as if she were a trophy buck. He'd bagged on a hunt. Can a lie sound this bold, Lena thought, her lips a tight line, her hands flexing against the cuffs as he launched into his tale, painting her as a wild thing who'd snarled and fought, his words piling up like bricks in a wall of fiction. She'd mouthed off, refused orders, practically begged for the steel now biting her skin. The clerk yawned, the reporter's fingers danced, the lawyers barely glanced up. But Judge Evans leaned forward, her sharp gaze narrowing on Lena, who stood tall despite the weight of Malone's nonsense, her bruised wrists hidden beneath the table, her silence a coiled spring ready to snap. Who does he think he's fooling with this circus? Lena's mind churned, her breath steady, each inhale sharpening her resolve as Malone's story grew taller, wilder, a house of cards she'd topple with a whisper. Evans tapped a pen against her blotter, cutting Malone off mid-sentence. Her voice crisp as a winter snap. "Let's hear from the defendant. Who are you, ma'am?" The room stilled, the air thickening as Lena lifted her chin, her glasses catching the light, her tone low but resonant, slicing through the haze like a blade. Through silk, Lena Washington, Chief Federal Prosecutor for the Northern District of Georgia. The words landed like a thunderclap, the clerk's head jerking up, the reporter's hands freezing mid-stroke, the lawyer's murmurs dying as their pens clattered to the table. A collective gasp rippling through the space, while Malone's jaw slackened, his ruddy face paling for a split second before his sneer snapped back, a mask of defiance he couldn't shed even now. How does a man double down when the truth guts him? Lena watched him, her calm unshaken, as Evans' eyes widened, then narrowed, flicking to Malone with a glint that promised trouble. "This court doesn't play games, officer," the judge said, her words ice-cold. "Uncuff her now." Malone fumbled with the keys, his thick fingers trembling as he stepped forward, the metal clinking free, Lena rubbing her wrists as blood rushed back, her skin mottled with red rings she'd wear like battle scars. She straightened her blazer, smoothing the fabric with a grace that mocked his clumsiness, her gaze locking on his, a silent vow etched in the steel of her stare. "This isn't over." Evans scribbled a note, her voice rising again. "You're free to go, Ms. Washington, this matter's dismissed," but Malone lingered, his sneer twisting into something uglier, his breath hot as he leaned close, muttering under the hum of the room. "You'll pay for making me look small." His threat a venomous thread weaving into her resolve. What kind of reckoning waits when a cop's pride turns to poison? Lena held his gaze unflinching as she turned to leave, the courtroom's murmurs swelling behind her, a tide of shock and whispers she'd ride into the storm ahead, her heels echoing down the hall, each step a drumbeat of war she'd wage. Against him, against the system that birthed him, her freedom won but her fight just begun. She pushed through the doors, the night air hitting her like a slap, her mind already racing. He'd struck first, but she'd strike harder, his arrogance a fuse she'd light to burn his world down. Comment number 1, if you think Malone's Ego deserves a fall. Hit that like button if Lena's strength fires you up, and subscribe to see her take this battle to the edge. Does a single spark like this ignite a blaze, or does it call down a hurricane? What's Malone plotting as Lena walks free, and how far will he go to bury her? Lana Washington stepped out of the courthouse into the damp Atlanta night, the humidity clinging to her skin like a second layer as she crossed the parking lot, her heels tapping a steady beat against the cracked asphalt, her bruised wrists pulsing. With each step, a reminder of Malone's cuffs now replaced by a simmering resolve that burned hotter than the city's heat. She slid into her SUV, the engine roaring to life, the jazz tune she'd left on earlier, now a faint hum beneath the roar of her thoughts, her mind replaying his parting snarl. "You'll pay for making me look small," a promise she knew wasn't idle, not from a man like Derek Malone, whose badge was a shield for his venom and whose pride was a fuse already lit. The drive home stretched long, the city's lights blurring into streaks of gold and red as she wove through late traffic, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Every few seconds, half expecting his cruiser to loom behind her again, but the road stayed clear, the quiet deceptive, a calm before a storm she couldn't yet see. She pulled into her driveway 30 minutes later, a modest brick house tucked in a cul-de-sac 10 miles north of downtown. Its porch light glowing soft amber against the dark, the silhouette of her 16-year-old son, Jamal, moving behind the curtains, his lanky frame bent over the kitchen table where she'd told him to finish his homework before she got back. She killed the engine, grabbed her purse and stepped out, the night air thick with crickets and the faint scent of honeysuckle, her shoulders easing for the first time in hours until a sharp crack shattered the stillness, a brick sailing through. Her front window, glass exploding inward with a sound like a gunshot. Jamal's startled yelp cutting through her chest like a knife. Lena dropped her purse, sprinting to the porch as another brick flew, this one smashing the door's sidelight, shards raining onto the welcome mat, and then the voices hit, a chorus of hate swelling from the shadows. "Go back where you came from," followed by slurs too raw to repeat, each word a jagged edge slicing at her soul. She burst inside, finding Jamal crouched behind the couch, his wide eyes locked on the broken window, his algebra book splayed on the floor, pages fluttering in the breeze now pouring through the gap, and she pulled him close, her arms a shield. As footsteps thudded outside, a mob of figures in hoodies and caps, their faces obscured but their intent clear as they sprayed paint across her porch, black letters spelling out filth she'd never let Jamal read. Who were they? And how did they know where she lived? Her mind raced, landing on Malone, his threat echoing as she peeked through the blinds, counting 6, maybe 7 shadows, one hefting a bat, another clutching a can, their laughter a sick melody under the street lamp's flicker. She grabbed her phone, dialing the precinct, her voice steady despite the tremor in her gut. "This is Lena Washington, my home's under attack. Send help now," but the dispatcher's response was slow, clipped. "We'll look into it, ma'am. No urgency." "No." Promise, just a pause that stretched too long before the line clicked dead. Lena's jaw tightened, her free hand clutching Jamal's shoulder as he whispered, "Mom, what's happening?" She didn't answer, couldn't, not yet, her gaze fixed on the chaos outside as the mob lobbed a final brick, this one cracking the mailbox before they scattered into the night, tires squealing as a pickup peeled away, leaving her lawn a battlefield of glass and hate. She waited. 5 minutes, 10, then 15. No sirens, no lights, just the hum of crickets and Jamal's shallow breaths beside her, his fear a mirror to the rage boiling in her veins. She called again. Same dispatcher, same excuse, no evidence. "No witnesses, will file a report." And that's when it clicked. Malone's reach, his allies in the precinct stalling, protecting their own, turning her plea into a joke while her home bled. She stood, guiding Jamal to his room. "Stay here, lock the door," her tone firm but soft. A mother's command wrapped in steel as she surveyed the damage, the spray paint dripping like blood down her front steps. The words, a branding she'd never. "Thansi," a message from a man who'd lost in court but won this round with a coward's weapon. How deep did his venom run? And who else wore his shield? Lena snapped photos, her phone's flash cutting through the dark, evidence she'd wield like a blade, each click a vow to bury him. But the victory from hours ago dissolved. Her freedom. A hollow shell as she realized this wasn't a skirmish. It was war, personal and systemic, a beast with teeth she'd underestimated. She moved to the kitchen, grabbing a broom, sweeping glass into jagged piles, her hands steady though her heart pounded, every crunch underfoot a drumbeat of what's next, her mind spinning. He'd leaked her address, sicked this pack on her, and the precinct's silence was his shield, a wall she'd have to crack. Jamal crept out, defying her order, his voice small. "Are they gone?" She nodded, pulling him into a hug, her chin resting on his head. But her eyes stayed on the wreckage, the shattered panes a mirror to her fracturing world, her career, her safety, her son's innocence, all targets now in Malone's crosshairs. She'd won in court, walked free. But this was his answer, a gut punch proving he'd strike where she bled most, and as she held Jamal tighter, she knew the night's terror was just the opening salvo, a taste of the hell he'd rained down to. Break her, a promise of worse she'd meet with fire of her own. The precinct's betrayal stung, their inaction a second blow. And as she stood amid the ruin, Lena's resolve hardened into something unyielding. A mother, a prosecutor, a warrior forged anew, ready to turn his game into his grave. Her next move already taking shape in the quiet, a plan to hit back twice as hard, to expose the rot that let this happen, to make him regret the day he crossed her path. Lena Washington stood in her kitchen at dawn, the first rays of sunlight slanting through the shattered window, glinting off the glass shards she'd swept into a pile, her hands still dusted with grit as she clutched her phone, its screen glowing. With the precinct's number she'd dialed 3 times since the mob tore her world apart last night, each call met with the same hollow promise of a report that never came. Jamal slept upstairs, his door locked at her insistence, his soft snores a fragile thread of peace she clung to while her mind churned, replaying the spray paint's venom, the brick's brutal arc, Malone's muttered threat, now a living nightmare staining her porch. She'd spent the pre-dawn hours uploading photos of the wreckage to a secure DOJ server, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from a fury that felt like molten steel in her veins. And now she dialed internal affairs, her voice cutting through the morning stillness. "This is Lena Washington, Chief Federal Prosecutor. I'm filing a formal complaint against Officer Derek Malone, assault, harassment, incitement," her tone a blade honed by years of courtroom battles, unwavering as she detailed the stop, the cuffs, the hate group's attack. Every word backed by the body cam footage she'd demanded from the precinct, a file she knew damned him. The IA officer, a gruff man named Hicks, listened, his pauses heavy with unease. "We'll need that video, ma'am, send it over." And she did, attaching the clip where Malone's voice sneered, "You people always lie." His shove against her SUV, a stark frame of abuse frozen in time. By noon, she stood outside her office downtown, a sleek tower of glass and steel, facing a swarm of reporters she'd called, their mics thrust forward like spears as she laid Malone bare, his record of brutality unrolled like a scroll of sins. 5 complaints of excessive force, 2 racial profiling cases, all buried under precinct red tape, her words sharp as she held up a printout of his file. "This ends now. Justice doesn't bend for badges." The crowd buzzed, cameras flashing, a black journalist nodding fiercely while a white anchor shifted uncomfortably, and within hours the precinct caved, Hicks phoning her back, Malone suspended, effective immediately, pending review, his voice clipped but carrying a weight that felt like victory, her chest swelling as she pictured Malone's sneer wiped clean, his cruiser parked, his power stripped. She exhaled, leaning against her desk, the city's skyline sprawling beyond her window, a rare smile tugging at her lips as she texted Jamal, "We got him. Stay safe. I'll be home soon," believing for a fleeting moment she'd won, that the system she'd fought to uphold had finally bent toward right. Could a single tape topple a titan like him? She dared to hope. The news spreading fast, her phone buzzing with DOJ colleagues' praise, her expose lighting up screens across Atlanta, protests sparking outside the precinct where signs read, "Justice." For Lena, a chant she heard faintly through the glass, her name a rallying cry she hadn't sought but wouldn't refuse. Night fell, the city pulsing with a restless energy as she drove home, the radio crackling with updates, Malone's suspension the lead story, and she let herself breathe, the tension in her shoulders easing as she pulled into her driveway, the porch still scarred but quiet now. No shadows lurking, no bricks flying, just the soft glow of Jamal's bedroom light, signaling he was safe. She stepped inside, locking the door, her victory a fragile shield until her phone rang again. An unknown number flashing, her gut tightening as she answered. "Captain Roy Grayson here, Malone's supervisor." His voice a low growl slicing through. Her calm, "We've got a problem, Ms. Washington." Who was this man daring to interrupt her triumph? Grayson, a grizzled veteran with 30 years on the force, his name a whisper in precinct halls, his clout a web of favors and fear, spoke with a chill that froze her blood. Procedural errors in the IA filing, Malone's back on duty, and we've got new evidence you assaulted him during that stop. A charge we're pursuing. Lena's breath caught, her mind reeling as he laid out the lie. A fake assault claim stitched from thin air, his tone smug as he added, "We'll see who's done." Her victory unraveling like thread pulled from a seam, the suspension a mirage. Malone's reinstatement a slap she hadn't seen coming. How could they twist truth this fast? She demanded proof, but Grayson chuckled, a sound like gravel crunching under boots. "You'll see it in court," and hung up, leaving her staring at the phone, the room spinning as Jamal's footsteps thudded down the stairs. "Mom, what's wrong?" She forced a smile. "Nothing I can't fix," but her heart pounded. Grayson's voice echoing with a power she hadn't gauged. A man who'd shielded Malone before, who'd buried those complaints she'd exposed, now striking back with a vengeance that dwarfed the mob's bricks. She grabbed her laptop, pulling up precinct records. Grayson's name a shadow over every dismissed case, his influence a noose tightening around her neck, and as she scrolled, a cold truth sank in. This wasn't just Malone's war, it was Grayson's. A captain who'd fixed this by breaking her, planting lies to crush her win. His smirk a ghost she'd hear in her sleep. Comment number 1 if you think Grayson's corruption runs too deep to ignore. Smash that like button if Lena's fight against this rigged game gets your pulse racing, and subscribe to catch every blow in this showdown. Can one woman outsmart a captain's web, or will his next move sink her for good? Lena Washington woke to the buzz of her phone on the nightstand, the screen flashing with a summons from the Atlanta courthouse, its stark words pulling her from a restless sleep haunted by Grayson's gravelly threat. "You assaulted him." A lie, now etched in official ink, ordering her to appear by 9 that morning. Her victory from yesterday a ghost dissolving in the grey dawn, filtering through her bedroom blinds. She sat up, the ache in her wrists flaring as she rubbed the fading cuff marks, her mind racing back to Malone's stop, his shove, her compliance, every second captured on that body cam she'd thought would bury him, now twisted into a noose, tightening around her throat. She dressed fast, a navy suit crisp against her skin, her hair pinned back with a precision that masked the storm in her chest, and kissed Jamal's forehead as he stirred. "Stay home today. School can wait." Her voice, calm but firm, a mother's shield against the chaos she knew was coming. The drive downtown was a blur, the city waking slow under a sky heavy with clouds, her SUV's tires humming against wet pavement as she replayed Grayson's call, his smug, "We'll see who's done," a taunt that echoed louder with each mile until she parked outside the courthouse, its brick facade looming like a judge's gavel poised to strike. She stepped inside, heels clicking through the same cramped hallway where Malone had paraded her 2 days ago. Now a battlefield of a different kind, the air thick with stale coffee and tension as she entered the courtroom, its benches half full, with clerks, lawyers, and a scattering of onlookers drawn by whispers of her name. Judge Henry Tate presided this time, a paunchy white man in his 60s, his jowls quivering as he shuffled papers, his reputation a murky blend of leniency and precinct ties Lena had long suspected but never faced until now, his watery eyes flicking to her with a glint she couldn't read as she took her place at the defendant's table. Alone, her DOJ badge useless against this trap. Captain Roy Grayson stood near the prosecution, his uniform starched, his silver hair slicked back, his presence a wall of authority beside Malone, who slouched in a chair, his smirk a jagged scar across his pale face, his suspension lifted, as if it had never happened, his eyes boring into her with a hate that promised more than cuffs this time. The bailiff called order, Tate's gavel thumping once, and the prosecutor, a wiry man named Ellis with a nasal drawl, launched in, "Your Honor, We charge Lena Washington with assaulting an officer during a lawful stop, his voice oily as he waved. A tablet, evidence submitted, and the screen above flickered to life, showing doctored footage of that night. Her figure warped to lunge at Malone, a clumsy edit splicing her calm compliance into a violent blur. Her hands raised not in surrender, but in a phantom strike that never happened. Lena's stomach dropped, her breath shallow as the room murmured. Tate peering over his glasses at the grainy lie. How did they spin this so fast? Her mind screamed, her gaze darting to Grayson, who nodded faintly at Ellis, a puppet master pulling strings she hadn't seen until now. She stood. Objection, Your Honor, that's fabricated. I have the original body cam file, but Tate waved her off. Sit down, Miss Washington. We'll hear your side later. His tone dismissive, his bias a brick wall as Ellis piled on. She's a threat? A prosecutor gone rogue? We request bail at $50,000, cash only, his words a hammer driving nails into her coffin. Lena's fists clenched under the table, her nails digging into her palms. This wasn't justice, it was a lynching in slow motion. Grayson's clout bending the court like a cheap toy, and as Tate nodded, bail's set. But I'll release her. On her own recognizance pending trial, she felt a flicker of relief snuffed out by Grayson's smirk, a predator's grin whispering she's done, his whisper to Malone, audible in the hush, we've got her now. The gavel fell, a dull thud echoing as she rose. Her suit creased from gripping the chair, her freedom a technicality while her reputation bled out. Headlines already brewing beyond these walls. Chief prosecutor charged, a stain she'd wear, like a brand. Her office's suspension notice hitting her inbox before she reached the door. Administrative leave. Effective immediately. Investigation pending. The words, a gut punch from allies she'd trusted. Jamal's text buzzed her phone. As she stepped into the hall, Mom, what's happening? And she typed back, just a bump, I'll fix it. A lie to shield him while her world crumbled. Grayson's shadow stretching long, his influence a cancer she'd underestimated, his fake charge a masterstroke to flip her win into ruin. She pushed through the courthouse doors, the muggy air hitting her face, her mind racing. How deep did his web run? Who else had he bought? The reporters swarmed, mics jabbing. Ms. Washington, did you attack him? And she brushed past, silent, her dignity a tattered flag she'd still wave, knowing this was no fluke. This was war, Grayson's war, a captain who'd rigged the game. When her exposé threatened his throne, planting this lie to break her spirit, her career, her life. She reached her SUV, slamming the door, her breath ragged as she gripped the wheel. The doctored tape replaying in her head, a fiction she'd disprove if she could just breathe, just think. But Grayson's smirk lingered, a promise of worse. And as she started the engine, Jamal's plea echoed. Let's leave, Mom, run. His voice a crack in her armor she couldn't mend yet, not when surrender meant letting them win. She pulled into traffic, resolve hardening like stone. She'd fight, she'd dig, she'd bury them both. Malone's grunt and Grayson's kingpin, but the courtroom's sting lingered, a wound bleeding doubt. Could she outsmart a system this rotten, or had she just stepped into their trap? The precinct's silence after the mob, now this frame-up, it was all connected. Grayson's hand steering every blow, and as she drove, she vowed to rip his empire apart, piece by bloody piece. Her next move a gamble she'd play with everything she had left. Lena Washington sat in her office late that afternoon. The downtown Atlanta skyline, a jagged silhouette against a bruised purple dusk, her desk buried under a landslide of case files she couldn't touch. Her suspension a chokehold tightening. With each unanswered email from DOJ colleagues, who'd once clapped her on the back, now silent as ghosts since Grayson's frame-up hit the wires, her phone buzzing with a single text from Jamal, Mom, I'm scared, stay safe. A plea that twisted her gut as she stared at the summons from court, its ink a fresh scar beside the doctored footage still looping in her mind, a lie she'd disprove if she could just find the crack in their wall. She leaned back, the leather chair creaking under her weight, her navy suit rumpled from a day of pacing, her glasses fogged with the breath of a plan forming, when a distant roar snapped her upright, a guttural chant swelling outside her window. Nigger bitch, get out! The words a serrated blade ripping through the quiet, her pulse spiking as she crossed to the glass, peering down 5 stories to the parking lot where a mob of 20, maybe 30, surged like a tide of hate. Their hoodies and caps a uniform of malice, their fists clutching torches that flickered orange against the asphalt. How did they find her here, and why now? Her breath fogged the pain as she spotted a figure barking orders, his bulk unmistakable even from this height. Malone, his suspension a sham, his reinstatement a green light to unleash this hell, his arm waving a bat as the crowd roared. Their voices a storm of slurs she'd heard spray-painted on her porch. Now alive and hungry for blood, a Molotov cocktail sailed upward, shattering against her SUV's hood, flames erupting with a whoosh that drowned the cicada's hum, the fire licking at the tires, black smoke curling into the sky as the mob cheered, a primal howl that shook the building's bones. Lena stumbled back, her heart hammering, her mind flashing to Jamal, safe at home with her sister now, thank God. But this was her war, her ground, and they'd torched it, her car a pyre signaling she'd never be safe. Not here, not anywhere. Security guards bolted from the lobby below, their shouts lost in the chaos as the mob scattered them like leaves, batons swinging uselessly against a wave that wouldn't break. And Lena grabbed her phone, dialing 911, her voice steel despite the quake in her chest. Fire at my office, 127 Peachtree, send help. But the line crackled, a dispatcher mumbling, "We're on it." A delay she knew wasn't chance. Grayson's hand in every stall, every silence since the bricks hit her house. She darted to the back stairwell, her heels clattering down 5 flights, the air growing thick with smoke as she burst into the alley, coughing, her lungs burning as she rounded the building, the flames now swallowing her SUV's frame. The heat a wall she couldn't breach. The mob spotted her, a dozen peeling off to charge, their boots pounding the pavement, a torch swinging close enough to singe her sleeve before she ducked behind a dumpster, its rusted edge scraping her palm. As she crouched, her breath ragged, her mind racing, where were the sirens, the backup, the law she'd sworn to uphold? Minutes bled into eternity, the mob circling, their laughter a jagged chorus until a lone guard fired a warning shot, scattering them into the dusk, their taunts fading as they melted into side streets, leaving her car a charred husk, its windows melted into grotesque shapes, a note tucked under the wiper. "Unburned, quit, or your kid's next," the scrawl a dagger twisting in her gut. Lena stood, her suit streaked with ash, her glasses smudged, her fury a live wire as she snatched the note, her fingers trembling with a rage she'd unleashed tenfold, the precinct's absence a second betrayal, Grayson's spin hitting the airwaves. Before she could blink, a radio crackling nearby, public outrage at a rogue prosecutor. His voice a velvet lie pinning this on her arrogance, her defiance, a narrative she'd shred if she could just breathe. Her DOJ allies faltered, emails trickling in. "We need distance, this is too hot." Their cowardice a third blow as she stumbled to a bench, the acrid stench of burning rubber stinging her nose. Her car a skeleton of twisted metal mocking her suspension. Her frame up, her every win now ash. Malone's face loomed in her mind, his bat-waving silhouette a specter of hate she'd underestimated. Grayson's puppet unleashed to break her where courts couldn't, and as she clutched the note, her resolve hardened into a blade. They'd struck her office, her sanctuary, but they wouldn't touch Jamal, not while she drew breath. She called her sister, "Keep him inside, lock everything." Her voice a whip cracking through the line, then dialed Tara Miles, a journalist she'd met years back, fierce and unbowed. "Tara, they torched my car, I need you." The words a lifeline. As she stood, ash flaking from her sleeves, the parking lot a war zone she'd turn against them. Grayson's spin a flimsy shield she'd pierce. Malone's mob a mistake he'd rue. The fire trucks arrived late, their hoses dousing a blaze already dead. The cops strolling in after, their shrugs a fourth betrayal, no witnesses, no leads, a script she'd heard before, but this time she'd rewrite it. Her next move a grenade, she'd lob into their lair. Her fight no longer just for her name, but for every soul they'd crushed under this hate. Her car's blackened shell a testament to their desperation, a spark she'd fan into their downfall. Lena Washington crouched in the alley behind her smoldering office, the night air heavy with the tang of charred rubber and gasoline, her suit streaked with soot, her glasses scratched from diving behind that dumpster, the "Quit or your kids." Next note crumpled in her fist as she dialed Tara Miles again, her voice a low hiss cutting through the wail of belated sirens. "Tara, Meet me at the diner on Piedmont. Bring your laptop. We're hitting back tonight. Her words a vow forged in. The fire that devoured her SUV, her resolve a furnace stoked by Malone's mob and Grayson's lies. She slipped through back streets, her heels traded for flats from her purse, her stride swift as she dodged pools of streetlight. The city's pulse a dull throb under her skin until she reached the diner, a neon-lit relic 2 miles east. Its windows fogged with grease and steam, Tara waiting in a corner booth, her auburn hair wild, her laptop open, her eyes glinting with a hunger for truth Lena knew could burn through Grayson's empire if aimed right. They hunched over coffee gone cold, Tara's fingers flying across keys as Lena spilled it all. The stop, the frame-up, the mob. Every blow since Malone's cuffs. Then pulled a USB from her blazer, Grayson's dirt, complaints buried for decades. Excessive force, beatings, payoffs, all stamp dismissed under his watch, her voice steady as she handed it over. 30 years of rot. Tara. He's the root, not just Malone, and we're ripping it out. How long had he shielded this filth, and who else wore his leash? Tara's grin was feral. Give me 2 hours, I'll have it live. And she did, cross-referencing Lena's files with precinct leaks she'd hoarded, crafting an exposé that named Grayson kingpin of a corrupt fiefdom. His signature a death knell on dozens of cases, black families silenced, lives crushed, a pattern of brutality stretching back to his rookie days, now blazing across her sight. The Atlanta Pulse, by midnight. 3,000 words of dynamite with Lena's USB as the fuse. The story hit like a shockwave. Phones buzzing citywide. Protests erupting outside Grayson's precinct by dawn. Tires screeching as cars circled. Horns blaring justice now. Signs waving Lena's name alongside victims from Grayson's past. Her tide she'd unleashed with a single stroke, her chest swelling as she watched from Tara's cramped apartment. The TV flickering with aerial shots, her counter-strike landing square. Grayson's face plastered on screen, suspended pending DOJ. Review. A headline she'd dreamed of since his smirk in court. Could one leak topple a captain this entrenched? She dared to believe it, sipping Tara's bitter tea, her pulse slowing for the first time in days, the mob's torches fading to memory as Jamal called, "Mom, they're cheering for you," his voice. A lifeline pulling her from the brink, safe with her sister still, a weight lifting as she whispered, "We're winning, baby. Stay put." The DOJ line rang next. A clipped voice, "We're opening an audit. Grayson's out. Malone's under scrutiny. Keep low." And she nodded to herself, victory's edge sharp in her grasp. Her suspension a distant sting as the city roared her name, a warrior's cry she'd earned with every scar. But the glow dimmed fast, her phone vibrating with a blocked number as Tara stepped out for air, Lena answering, her breath catching at Malone's growl. "You think this ends me?" A muffled sob followed. Jamal's voice, "Mom, help," and the line. Cut dead, her world fracturing as she bolted upright, the tea spilling across Tara's rug, her mind screaming. He'd taken her son, her heart, her everything, right when she'd thought she'd won. How had he struck so swift, so cruel? She called her sister, no answer. Then Tara burst in, "Lena, what's wrong?" And she choked out, "Malone's got Jamal's school pickup," he knew, her fists pounding the table as Tara grabbed her keys. "We'll find him now." But Lena's legs shook, her triumph a hollow shell. Grayson's suspension a distraction while Malone played his ace, abducting her boy from under her nose, a voicemail pinging as she stumbled out. Malone's rasp, "Step off, or he's gone," a threat that turned her blood to ice, her counter-strike backfiring in the worst way. Her son's life, the cost of her defiance. They raced to her sister's house, finding it trashed, furniture flipped, a neighbor babbling, saw a cop take him. Big guy, buzzed hair, Malone's shadow etched in every word, her sister dazed on the lawn. "He hit me," took Jamal, Lena's knees. Buckling as guilt clawed her chest, "I pushed too hard, too fast." Her exposé a flare that lit her victory and his revenge. Grayson's fall a spark for Malone's rage, now a beast unbound, striking where she bled most. Tara pulled her up, "We'll get him back." But Lena's eyes burned, her mind a storm of plans and panic, every protest chant outside a mockery now. Her win a Pyrrhic jest as she traced Malone's steps, school to here, a trail she'd follow. To hell, her USB a sword that cut both ways, exposing rot but losing Jamal. a trade she'd never meant to make. She gripped Tara's arm. "Call your cop source, find his hole." Her voice a whip cracking through despair, her fight shifting from Grayson's throne to Malone's lair, a mother's wrath rising above the prosecutors. Her next move, a desperate lunge to reclaim her son. The city's cheers a distant echo as she plunged into the dark. Malone's abduction a blow she'd turn back on him. If she could just hold on, just breathe, just strike. Lena Washington stood trembling on her sister's trashed lawn, the night swallowing Atlanta whole. As Tara Miles gripped her shoulder, her car keys jangling, "We'll find him, Lena, let's move." But Lena's world had shrunk to the echo of Jamal's. "Sub on that voicemail, Mom, help!" A sound that clawed her insides raw. Her suit still dusted with ash from the office fire, her glasses fogged with unshed tears as she nodded, her voice a jagged shard. "Call your cop source now. We need Malone's hideout." Her mind a whirlwind of guilt and fury, the exposés, triumph ashes in her mouth since he'd snatched her son. A blow she'd never seen coming. Tara dialed fast, her phone pressed to her ear as they piled into her beat-up sedan, the engine coughing to life while Lena clutched the crumpled note from her torched SUV, "Quit or your kid's next," a prophecy fulfilled too soon, her counterstrike. Against Grayson, a flare that lit her victory and his revenge. Malone's bat-waving silhouette, now a kidnapper's shadow she'd hunt to the ends of the earth. Tara's source, a jittery ex-detective named Vince, rasped through the speaker. "He's got a spot, old warehouse off Moreland, East Side, likes to hole up there," and Lena's heart lurched, her DOJ contacts flashing in her mind, a Rolodex of favors she'd cash in, her fingers flying over her phone as she texted a trusted analyst. "Ping Malone's cell, triangulate, urgent," her breath hitching as Tara floored it, the sedan weaving through midnight streets, neon signs blurring into streaks of pink and green. Could she outrace a monster who'd turned her win into this nightmare? The analyst replied fast, "Signals live. Warehouse confirmed, 10 miles out." And Lena's resolve hardened, a mother's instinct fusing with a prosecutor's precision, her plans snapping into place as she whispered to Tara, "We go in quiet. Get Jamal. No cops yet, Malone's too wired." Her voice a steel thread weaving through panic, every jolt of the car a countdown to her son's breath. They parked a block away, the warehouse looming like a decayed beast, its rusted walls sagging under a moonless sky, broken windows gaping like wounds as Lena crept forward, Tara at her heels, her flat silent on cracked concrete, her pulse a drumbeat drowning the distant hum of traffic. What traps hid in this den of hate? She spotted Malone's cruiser tucked behind a dumpster, its grille glinting, proof he was here, her boy close, and she edged to a side door, its hinges groaning. As she slipped inside, the air thick with mold and oil, shadows pooling in corners where crates towered like crooked teeth. A faint whimper guided her, Jamal's voice soft, scared, and she followed it, ducking under a beam, Tara's breath ragged behind her as they wove through a maze of junk, past oil drums and splintered pallets, until she saw him, her son, 16, and gangly, curled in a metal crate, his wrists zip-tied, his eyes wide with terror that broke her heart anew. How could a badge sink this low, stealing a child for spite? She hissed his name, "Jamal, I'm here," and he jolted, relief flooding his face as she knelt. Tara pulling a pocket knife, slicing the ties, his skinny arms flinging around her neck. "Mom, he's crazy," her whisper fierce. "I've got you, we're gone," but Malone's trap snapped tight, a tripwire clanging as they rose, a floodlight blinding them, his bulk lunging from the dark, a bat swinging, Tara shoving Lena aside as it cracked her shoulder, a yelp swallowed by his roar, "You're dead, bitch." His eyes wild, his uniform traded for a sweat-stained shirt, a man unhinged by her exposé's fallout. Lena rolled, grabbing a rusted pipe, swinging it at his knees, a dull thud dropping him as Jamal scrambled free, Tara clutching her arm. "We've got to run." And they did, bolting through the maze, Malone's curses echoing as he staggered up, his bats scraping the floor. A hunter denied his kill. Sirens wailed at last, too late as they burst into the alley. Lena clutching Jamal, her chest heaving, Tara limping beside her, cops swarming now, cuffs snapping on Malone mid-rant. "You can't touch me. Grayson'll fix this." His arrest a fleeting win. The city hailing her a hero on morning news. Mother saves son, cop caught. a headline she'd trade to erase this night. Could triumph taste this bitter, this frail? She hugged Jamal tighter, safe in Tara's car, the warehouse fading behind them, her rescue a blaze of grit and luck. But as they pulled into her driveway, dawn breaking over the scarred porch, sirens screamed anew, SWAT rifles glinting in her yard. A bullhorn barking, Lena Washington come out, hands up, drugs found, her blood icing as she stepped out. Jamal's cry, "Mom, what now?" piercing her soul, Grayson's unseen hand planting this frame, her win undone by a stash she'd never touched. Cops storming her home, rifles aimed at her head. Malone's arrest a distraction while Grayson struck deeper, her rescue a fleeting gasp before this plunge, her fight far from over as she faced the barrels unbowed but trapped. Comment number 1 if you think Lena's courage outshines this betrayal. Hit that like button if her battle against these snakes lights a fire in you, and subscribe to see her claw out of this pit. When does a mother's save become a system's snare? And what's Grayson brewing behind those guns? Lena Washington stood frozen on her driveway as dawn bled across Atlanta's suburbs. SWAT rifles glinting like fangs in the early light, their barrels trained on her chest, her hands rising slow as the bullhorn blared again. Lena Washington, you're under arrest. Drug possession with intent. Step forward, her mind reeling from the rescue's high, Jamal safe beside her in Tara's car, to this gut-wrenching drop. Grayson's planted stash a phantom she couldn't see but felt closing in. Her son's cry, "Mom, no." A knife twisting deeper as cops swarmed her porch, boots thudding through the wreckage from Malone's mob, now a stage for this new lie. She complied, her flats scuffing the gravel, her ash-streaked suit a tattered flag of defiance as they cuffed her wrists again, the steel colder than Malone's, her gaze locking on Tara. "Get Jamal out. Call my sister," her voice a whip through. The chaos, Tara nodding, tears streaking her face as she pulled Jamal back, his skinny frame fighting to reach her, a sight that broke her more than the rifle's aim. The precinct swallowed her fast, a grey blur of booking, mugshots, her print smudged on a card she'd never dreamed she'd hold, her DOJ badge a memory as they shoved her into an arraignment room, the same courthouse where she'd stood free. Days ago, now a cage with Judge Tate back on the bench, his jowls quivering as he read the charge. 10 pounds of cocaine found in your home, Ms. Washington. His tone heavy with a relish she hadn't caught before. Grayson's shadow looming in the gallery, his uniform crisp, his suspension lifted on bail, his smirk a silent gloat as the prosecutor Ellis spun the tale. She's unstable, a drug-running prosecutor, a danger to the community. His nasal drawl, a venom-dripping lies she couldn't counter, not yet. How had Grayson turned her rescue into this abyss? She scanned the room, spotting familiar faces. Her DOJ deputies Carter and Mills seated behind Ellis, their eyes averted, their ties knotted tight as they nodded to his words, testifying she'd snapped under pressure. Her suspension a sign of collapse, their voices mechanical. "We saw her unravel, she's unfit," a betrayal that stung worse than the cuffs, her allies bought by Grayson's bribes, his clout a web she'd underestimated, her chest hollowing as Tate banged his gavel, bail denied, remanded to custody, trial in 2 weeks, his ruling a hammer smashing her freedom, her son's safety, her every win since Malone's stop. They hauled her to county lockup, a squat concrete box 10 miles south, her cell a 6x8 tomb of peeling paint and stale air, the clang of bars a death knell as she sank onto the cot, her suit traded for an orange jumpsuit, her glasses confiscated, her world blurring as Grayson's visit came an hour later, his boots clicking on the grimy floor, his bulk filling the cell door. "You thought you'd win," his growl a taunt as he leaned close, his breath sour with tobacco. "I own this game, your kid's next if you don't fold." A threat she met with silence, her eyes steel despite the quake in her gut, his laugh a rasp as he turned away, leaving. Heard a stew in this pit he'd dug. Who else had he turned, and how deep did his rot sink? She paced, the cold concrete biting her bare feet, her mind clawing for a way out when a scream pierced the cell block, a guard's shout, shank attack, and 3 inmates lunged through her bars, Grayson's prison cronies, their blades flashing. As she dodged, a jagged edge slicing her arm, blood blooming red against the orange as she kicked one's knee. Her pipe-swinging grit from the warehouse flaring back, slamming another into the wall, the third fleeing as guards stormed in too. Late, Her arm dripping, her breath ragged, alive but battered. A message from Grayson she'd survived by instinct alone. She slumped against the cot, the sting of betrayal sharper than the cut. Carter and Mills's words replaying, unstable, unfit, a script they'd sold for cash or fear. Her DOJ family, a myth shattered by his gold, her suspension, her frame-up. Now this attack, all threads in his tapestry of ruin. Her son's face, her only anchor as she wrapped her sleeve around the wound, the blood soaking through, a badge of a war she'd underestimated. Malone's arrest a feint while Grayson played. King, his empire striking where she bled most. She'd saved Jamal, exposed rot, but at what cost? Her cellmate, a wiry woman named Kay, eyed her from the top bunk. You pissed off the wrong guy. Her whisper a warning as she tossed Lena a rag. They'll kill you in here. And Lena nodded, her resolve hardening through the pain. She'd fight. She'd claw out. Grayson's glow to fuel, she'd turn to fire. Her allies' betrayal a wound she'd wield. Her next move a breakout she'd risk everything for. Jail a cage she'd shatter to reclaim her son, her name, her justice, the systems. What a beast she'd slay if she could just hold on. Just breathe, just strike back harder than they'd ever dreamed. Lena Washington lay on her cell's cot. The damp rag Kay had tossed her now stiff with dried blood, her arm throbbing where Grayson's cronies had sliced her. The orange jumpsuit clinging to her sweat-soaked skin as the county lockups stale, hair pressed down, her mind a furnace of plans sparked by his gloat. You thought you'd win, a taunt she'd turn into his undoing, her son's face her North Star in this concrete hell 10 miles south of Atlanta, where guards' boots echoed, like distant thunder, and the hum of flickering lights mocked her every breath. She'd survived their shanks by grit alone, her pipe-swinging fury from the warehouse flaring back. But survival wasn't enough. Not with Jamal out there, not with Grayson's threat. Your kid's next, a noose she'd snap before it tightened. Her DOJ allies' betrayal a fresh wound fueling her fire. Carter and Mills's lies a betrayal she'd wield like a blade if she could just break free. Kay shifted on the top bunk, her wiry frame tense. They'll try again, you know. Her whisper a spark Lena seized, her voice low. Then we move first, you with me? Kay's nod was slow, her eyes glinting with a desperation mirroring Lena's. Two women caged by the same rot, a pact sealed in the dark as Lena mapped the block. The guard rotations, the weak spots she'd spotted in her 3 days here, her prosecutor's mind dissecting this prison like a case file. She'd befriended others. A gaunt woman named Tish, a hulking figure called Big Marie, both beaten down by Grayson's system. Their stories of rigged charges and buried pleas a chorus she'd lead into chaos. Her plan a riot to crack this tomb, her whisper spreading through the bars. Tonight we fight. Her cellmate's nods a fragile army rallied by a woman they barely knew, but trusted to burn it down. At midnight, the lights dimmed. A guard's yawn signaling the shift change, and Lena struck, slamming her cot against the bars. A clang that jolted the block awake, Kay shrieking, Tish hurling a tray, Big Marie's roar shaking the walls as inmates joined. A tide of screams and bangs drowning the guards' shouts, fists pounding steel, a symphony of rage Lena conducted from her cell, her heart pounding as chaos bloomed, a distraction blooming into freedom's edge. How long could they hold this storm before it broke her too? The guards scrambled, batons swinging, but the tide overwhelmed, a lock snapping somewhere. Keys jangling as Lena kicked her door, the hinges groaning. Kay wedging a shank into the gap, prying it wide, her arm bleeding anew as she squeezed through. Tish and Marie behind her, a ragged crew sprinting down the hall. Alarms blaring red as Lena led them to the yard, a chain-link fence glinting under floodlights, her hands clawing at wire, ripping skin as she climbed, freedom a breath away. She dropped to the other side, mud splashing her legs, Tara's sedan screeching up from a side road, her auburn hair wild through the window. Get in now. Her voice a lifeline as Lena dove inside, Kay and the others scattering into the night. Her chest heaving as Tara floored it, the prison shrinking in the rear view, a siren's wail chasing but fading as they hit the city's veins, her breakout a gamble one, her lungs burning with air she'd stolen back. Tara thrust a burner phone at her. Got Grayson's bribe proof, bank records, it's live now. And Lena dialed a DOJ whistleblower line, her voice hoarse. Check the Atlanta Pulse, Grayson's done. Her words a match to Tara's latest drop, broadcast. From a safe house 10 miles west, crashing his reinstatement hearing as TVs blazed, Captain indicted, a headline she'd bled for, her charges dropping as IA swarmed, her frame-up crumbling under truth's weight. Freedom hers again, or so she thought. She hugged Tara. "We did it." Her whisper a prayer as they pulled into the safe house, a crumbling duplex under a sagging oak, Jamal's voice on the line. "Mom, you're out." A joy she clung to, her arm bandaged now, her spirit soaring until a gunshot split the night. Tara slumping over the table, blood pooling red. Malone's shadow in the doorway, his pistol smoking. "You don't quit, do you?" His rasp a death knell as he aimed at her. Cops closing in too late, her breakout a fleeting gasp undone by his bullet. Tara's body a weight she'd carry, Grayson's indictment a hollow win as Malone pinned this on her. Sirens screaming as she stumbled back. Her friend gone, her fight a pyre she'd lit herself. Her next move a stand she'd make alone if she could just dodge his aim, just breathe, just strike back one last time. Lena Washington stumbled back from Tara's lifeless body. The safe house's dim kitchen awash in crimson as Malone's pistol smoked, his hulking frame filling the doorway, his buzzed hair slick with sweat, his eyes wild with a hate that had festered since her courtroom reveal. "You don't quit, do you?" His rasp a venomous echo as he aimed at her chest, her bandaged arm throbbing, her orange jumpsuit stained with jail mud, and now her friend's blood. The burner phone slipping from her hand as sirens wailed closer. Too slow to save her from this beast unbound by Grayson's fall. She dove behind the table, wood splintering as his shot missed, her mind a storm of grief and grit. Tara's sacrifice a torch she'd carry, her breakout a fleeting breath now choking on this ambush. Malone's freedom on bond, a loophole, Grayson's. Empire had left, his bullet a final bid to bury her where courts and mobs couldn't. She crawled, her knees scraping linoleum, snatching a butcher knife from the counter, her breath ragged as he lumbered forward, his boots thudding. "You're done." His growl a promise she'd defy with her last gasp, her son's face her anchor, Jamal safe. With her sister, a lifeline she'd cling to as she sprang up, slashing at his arm. Blood spraying as he howled, the gun clattering to the floor, a fleeting edge she seized. How could one man's rage outlast his ruin? She kicked the pistol away, her flat slipping in Tara's blood, her heart a drumbeat as she bolted for the back door. Malone lunging, his bat from the warehouse days swinging wild, crashing into the wall as she ducked outside. The night air, slapping her face, a derelict pier stretching into Atlanta's outskirts, its rotting planks her battlefield now. She ran, her lungs burning, sirens swelling as a cruiser screeched up. Marcus, a rogue cop she'd met years back, leaping out, hands up. "Malone, stop!" His voice a crack through the dark, his badge a flicker of hope she hadn't dared summon, his dark skin a mirror to hers, his eyes sharp with a justice she'd lost faith in. Malone froze, bat raised, then charged, Marcus tackling him. Fists flying as Lena circled back, grabbing the burner from the kitchen, her hands shaking as she hit record, Malone's rant spilling out. "I killed her, pinned it on you, Graysons." Orders, a confession raw and unscripted, her knife still dripping his blood as Marcus cuffed him mid-snarl. "You're done, pig," his voice a balm to her ears, the tape a golden thread she'd weave into their graves. Cops swarmed, lights flashing. Malone dragged off, his curses fading as Marcus pulled her aside. "You're clear, Lena." Tara's death's on him, his words a lifeline snapping her charges, Grayson's empire collapsing under the weight of this. Tape, IA storming his hearing downtown. Indictments piling up. Captain's reign ends. A headline she'd bleed for, her suspension lifted, her name cleansed. A victory she'd claw from this night's wreckage. She sank to the pier's edge, the Chattahoochee River lapping below. Its muddy churn a mirror to her soul, Jamal's voice on Marcus's phone. "Mom, you're safe." A sob breaking her as she whispered, "I'm coming, baby." Her fight a pyre that had cost Tara, cost everything. But won this round, Malone's arrest a brick pulled from Grayson's wall, her breath steadying as she stood, Marcus nodding, "We'll get the rest." His promise a spark she'd fan later, her grief a weight she'd bear alone. Could she rest when the war wasn't won? She walked to his cruiser, the city's pulse faint beyond the trees, her resolve a blade tempered by loss, when a crack split the silence, a sniper's bullet grazing her scalp, blood trickling warm as she dropped. Jamal's scream through the phone. "Mom!" Her vision blurring as Marcus yelled, "Shooter, get down," his gun drawn, scanning the dark. Grayson's secret partner, a US senator, stepping from the shadows in her mind, his influence a ghost she'd missed, ordering this hit as she hugged. Jamal's voice, her triumph a fragile shell cracking under this unseen blow, the fight far from over, her body slumping as Marcus dragged her behind cover, bullets pinging wood, her last stand a gasp before the dark, a war she'd wage if she could just rise, just breathe, just strike one final time. Lena Washington hit the pier's splintered planks as the sniper's bullet grazed her scalp, blood seeping warm through her hair, her ears ringing as Marcus yanked her behind a rusted barrel, his shouts lost in the roar of her pulse. Jamal's voice crackling through the phone clutched in her hand. "Mum, stay with me." A lifeline she gripped as bullets chewed the wood around them, Grayson's empire in ashes, but his unseen ally, a US senator, striking from the dark, his shadow of venom. She'd missed until it bit. Her final stand a breath from collapse under Atlanta's starless sky. She pressed the phone to her chest, her jumpsuit soaked with mud and Tara's blood, her arms gash pulsing, her vision swimming as Marcus fired back, his pistol a desperate bark against the unseen shooter. Where's he at? His growl a tether, pulling her from the edge as she rasped, "High ground left." Her prosecutor's mind slicing through panic, spotting a glint on a warehouse roof 200 yards off, a perch she'd mark for later, if there was a later. Pain seared her skull, but she crawled, her knees digging into gravel. Marcus covering her as a second shot whined past, her breath hitching, Grayson's fall a hollow win if this senator snuffed her now. His power a deeper rot she'd only grazed. His hit a bid to silence her tape, her fight, her very breath. How had she missed this puppet master pulling strings from DC? She reached the pier's end, the Chattahoochee's dank breath rising, her plan snapping into place. "We fake it, Marcus. Blow the car." Her whisper fierce as she pointed to Tara's sedan, parked a block back. It's tanker bomb she'd like to flip this game, her fingers fumbling with the burner, texting a DOJ code to a ghost line. Senator's hit. Check pulse. Her last card played as Marcus nodded, sprinting low, a match struck against his flint, tossing it through the window, the explosion blooming orange, a roar swallowing the night as flames licked the sky. Her body slumped beside Jamal's voice. "Play dead, baby. I'm okay." A lie she'd sell to save him. The sniper paused, the shot stilled, Marcus dragging her limp into the river's shadow, her blood smearing the bank, a convincing corpse as copters buzzed overhead, SWAT swarming late, the senator's man vanishing into the dark, his boss gloating. In some marble office thinking her gone, her fight snuffed. A victory he'd savor until she struck back. Days bled into weeks. Lena and Jamal vanished. Her sister's house a decoy emptied out, the city mourning chief prosecutor lost in blast. A headline Marcus fed, his rise to precinct chief a quiet coup she'd orchestrated from the shadows. His hands planting her evidence, Grayson's bribe logs, Malone's confession, now the senator's ties, a dossier Tara's death had bought, her sacrifice a seed blooming as IA raided DC, the senator's cuffs clicking months later, a DOJ sting tearing his empire down, his stunned face on every screen as Lena emerged, alive, her hair shorn, her glasses swapped for contacts, a covert whistleblower in a safe house 5 states north, her voice a ghost on encrypted lines. "This is just the start, Jamal," her whisper to her son a vow etched in steel, his nod beside her a mirror to her fire, 16 and unbroken, her partner now in this underground war. Could a faked death rewrite justice's end? She stood at a cracked window, a new city sprawling beyond, her scalp scar a badge under her cap, her arm healed but stiff, her eyes burning with a purpose Grayson Malone, the senator, couldn't quench. There falls a tremor she'd turn to and quake, her DOJ badge traded for shadows, her name a whisper dismantling precincts, systems, empires from within, every leak a brick pulled from their walls, every sting a blade she'd honed since that. First stop, Marcus called weekly. Updates on Atlanta's purge. Malone jailed for Tara's murder. Grayson rotting in a cell. The senator's plea a whimper she'd orchestrated, but her fight stretched beyond. A network of rot she'd map, her son's safety. Her fuel, his algebra books now beside encrypted laptops. A boy-turned-soldier in her crusade, her love a shield she'd wield as fiercely as her mind. She'd lost Tara, her old life, her office's gleam, but gained this. A shadow war where justice wasn't begged but carved. Her peer stand a feint that won her this edge. The senator's arrest a shockwave she'd ride. Her whisper to Jamal, a promise we'll burn it all down. Her gaze unyielding. A mother, a warrior, a ghost reborn, the system's dark, a beast she'd slay. One case, one leak, one fight at a time. Her end a beginning, they'd never see coming. Her fire ablaze. That'd never fade. Lena Washington's journey in cop drags wrong black woman to court. 5 minutes later, learns she's the USAO chief federal prosecutor, offers profound lessons on resilience, systemic injustice, and the cost of standing up. First, it shows that courage can spark change, even against overwhelming odds. Lena's refusal to bow to Malone's brutality and Grayson's corruption ignited a movement, proving one voice can crack a rotten foundation. Yet it also reveals the steep price of defiance. Her victories came with scars, from her torched car to Tara's death, a reminder that justice often demands sacrifice. Second, the story exposes how racism isn't just personal, but woven into institutions, with Grayson's precinct shielding hate and the senator's hit proving power protects its own. Lena's fight wasn't against lone bigots, but a network thriving on silence. Third, it teaches adaptability. Faking her death to strike from the shadows, she turned loss into leverage, showing that survival sometimes means rewriting the rules. Finally, it underscores the power of community. Marcus, Tara, and even Jamal became her strength, highlighting that no battle is won alone. This tale isn't just about triumph, it's a mirror to our world's flaws, urging us to question who pays for truth and how far we'd go to claim it. So what's your take? Comment below. Would you risk it all like Lena to fight injustice? Hit like if her grit inspires you, subscribe for more tales of unbreakable spirits, and share to spread this call for justice. Thanks for joining this journey. Here's to a world where truth prevails and resilience shines.